Hey guys, I'm Phoenix here and welcome to Farming Simulator. Now, sorry for Farming Simulator, I'm not particularly with it today and I just wanted something that was reasonably dull. Yeah, so I was playing this and I went onto YouTube as I usually do, and Mundane Matt had a new video out on Jim Sterling, not Jim Sterling, well Jim Sterling as well, but Digital Homicide, suing or attempting to raise, they want to raise money to sue Jim Sterling for defamation of character. Now, this is apparently a landmark thing and all this, but a little while ago I actually unsubscribed from Jim Sterling because I felt that his criticism was just getting a little bit over the top. He would target games and claim they were terrible. And I didn't necessarily get that from all the videos that he was covering. Yeah, 90% of the games that he was either playing or doing the Steam Greenlight trailers of were rubbish. But some of them he was hammering on. The one that really triggered it for me was The Adventures of Mr. Bobley, which he really didn't like. But, you know, okay, it's probably not my sort of game anyway. But it didn't look bad. You know, it certainly didn't warrant the attack it was getting. So, yeah, anyway, I unsubscribed from Jim Sterling because I just thought he was very much milking this idea of terrible games on Steam. But there are some games which you think, well, these games come from a company that I should just avoid. And Digital Homicide is one of those. Now, I have actually had a discussion, it was on Steam, with one of the developers of Digital Homicide, and I was just saying, look, if you want your game to be something special, I guess, then do things yourself. So don't just buy the assets, make the assets, because it's not particularly difficult to make assets, especially not if you work up an art style in which you don't necessarily have to have the best graphics anyway. Because my art style, you've probably seen, it's quite simplistic. It's quite, I guess, modern in the sense that of modern art. I would not say it was necessarily art, but it is definitely does use sort of more sort of clean lines and that. That's basically because I'm not very good at modelling and I'm not very good at texturing. But if I make a reasonably decent model-ish and put a reasonably simplistic texture on top, it doesn't look bad. As opposed to if I was trying to make something that looked hyper-realistic with a hyper-realistic texture on it, it would look terrible. So, you know, make things look good by not making them look good, essentially is what I'm going for. And that was basically my suggestion to them, to look at modelling and texturing and, you know, doing as much as they possibly could themselves because they can learn how to do it. And the guy who I was talking to, I don't know which brother I was talking to, but he seemed quite amicable. And, you know, we had, I guess, a reasonably civilised debate on this. Just, you know, via the medium of Steam forums. But, surprise, surprise, he didn't actually take any of this advice. Nope, they just went on their merry way with stealing assets and paying for their assets and just throwing all their assets into a big mixing pot and hoping that what comes out is gold. And actually what came out was a sort of a thin substance. Who knows? It wasn't particularly great, and time again we've basically seen the same thing coming out of them over and over again. Their reasoning, or, you know, I can understand why they do it, because if you release a terrible game, then you are going to get people like Jim Sterling, who's a perfect sucker for this sort of thing, going up and saying, look at how terrible this game is. As a result, people buy it as a joke. They buy it for their friends, they buy it for themselves. They may not necessarily spend, you know, actual money on it. They might use, you know, money that they've made from selling trading cards because they think, oh, you know, that doesn't matter. It's just, I'm not spending any money on them. This is money that I've made via Steam. The thing is, you are giving money to them, all in all. You are giving money to these unscrupulous developers who will just churn out rubbish time and time again. So anyway, they released this terrible game. Jim Sterling, like the sucker he is, picks it up. Shows the world how terrible it is. They have a bit of an argy-bargy. Works out quite well for both of them, all in all. And so Digital Homicide do it again and again. And Jim Sterling, being the sucker that he is, falls for it time and time again, making these videos and doing free advertising for Digital Homicide, who make their money off people who are just buying it for a joke, or so that they can make YouTube videos. And the cycle continues. Yeah, I know what's going on. And I'm sure quite a few people know what's going on. But Digital Homicide have now decided that their next step for getting people's attention, because they are just attention seekers, is by suing Jim Sterling. Now, at this point, this is a bit interesting because eyes are one way, mouth is the other. Anyway, so they claim that they have been falsely accused of stealing artwork, which they did, stealing assets, which they did, flipping projects with no work put in, which they did, doxing, which I believe they did. There was certainly some links to the Jim Sterling doxing that was done. And they certainly attempted to dox him on the debate session they had, where they claimed, "Oh, is this person your sister?" Yeah. Had products misrepresented. God, I can't read this morning. Had products misrepresented with intention to do damage. I don't really think they can necessarily say that. Yeah, I think that's because how can you misrepresent something like the Slaughtering Grounds? It's a terrible game. Yeah. Of illegally using another company's name, which they did actually, sort of. They claimed that they were a company name, but they may not have necessarily realised that the other company existed. So they may have not necessarily have intentionally used another company's name, but they did do it. Of conducting illegal business activities. I don't know if anybody's actually said that. Certainly there's been some very dubious business activities. I think it probably falls into the grey area of technically they can have lots of games running under different companies which are all linked to them, but it is a little bit dodgy to do that. I think Sargon Ricard actually he talked about this. He talked about British business law and that he can set himself up as a trader, a single trader, or there's this one where if you've got a partner in the company, then you can run the company without actually registering it as a company. I think that's how it goes. But as a result, they can make their company name whatever they like, and they can trade under whatever company they like. But they're registered as a trader under their own names, and then they use a business name which they can just create on their products. So whilst it's not technically illegal to sell things under multiple different company names, it is shady. Impersonating someone. Did they do that? I have a strange feeling they did. But it's very, I've been falsely accused of impersonating someone. Who? Who were you falsely accused of impersonating? Yes. And the last one is being incompetent and unable to perform my job. Yep, I would go with that. I don't necessarily think that it's an incompetence of intention. I do think that quite a lot of this is ignorance. It's putting your product out and thinking, yes, this is the best thing in the world. And maybe you've showed it to friends or family who have said, yes, this is the best thing in the world. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best thing in the world. It just means that people either think it's the best thing in the world, or they're just saying that it's the best thing in the world. It's why you always get a tester to test your product first. Because testers are a necessary evil. They will break your game. Don't get annoyed at them for doing so. Your code isn't going to be perfect. And a tester will use essentially your ignorance against you, I guess. And it's not a bad thing that they're doing. It's actually quite a good thing. It means that if a tester can break it, and if you fix the things that your tester broke, then a member of the general public isn't going to break it. And that is a good thing. Because the general public are the people that need the best experience, not the tester and not you. So he claims that he's been impersonated and his name has been dragged through the mud, not only by the individual being sued, but by some of the over 300,000 of his subscribers who come to my game forum pages and other locations and say such thing as this. Now, something that I should note is that I was actually a subscriber of Jim Sterling when I went to his forum and had a reasonably civil discussion with him. But I do understand that when you put something out there, like Jim Sterling puts something out there, he's got a lot of subscribers, and they are going to go to the forum of the people that he's not exactly directed there, but, there is a certain amount of responsibility that YouTubers have for where they send people. And even if they say, like Sargon Ricardo said, do not contact these people, some people are still going to contact them. You cannot necessarily be completely responsible for your subscribers' actions because they are individual people, ultimately. You can't ban them from doing something that you don't want them to do. That's not how the internet works. Simple as. So, your wife is a whore, you're a thief, you're a fraud, you're a scammer, you have been died in a fiery car crash. If you show up at gaming convention XXX, I will beat you down, you're shady, your company impersonates other companies, you need to get off this system where we do business, you'll be made an example of, I feel sorry for your kids having such an incompetent parent, and much more. Yeah, this is the sort of stuff you get on the internet. I've had on various spheres of forums that I've been on, I've had abuse. It's just part of the internet, all in all. You're gonna get it, and all of it is complete. If you show up at gaming convention XXX, I will beat you down. Yeah, like that's actually going to happen, really. And quite frankly, if this guy was a guy, I know we're not meant to be using that sort of thing. I'd pull up the Latin for coward, but I can't actually remember it. But yeah, if the guy wasn't such a coward, let's go with that. He would go to Gaming XXX and say, "Yes, I am one half of Digital Homicide. Come at me." But unfortunately, this is a cowardly company. I do like the idea that somebody contacted the Jehovah's Witnesses website and had them pay him a visit. Now, as somebody who lives in England, yeah, we get the visits from Jehovah's Witnesses. I have had an interesting discussion with a Jehovah's Witness. It was quite hypocritical, all in all. I had to go into religion, but yeah. Because I was basically saying to this Jehovah's Witness that I don't think that parents should force their children into a religion. I think that the children themselves should decide, at 16 or whatever, whether or not they want religion to be part of their lives, essentially. And the Jehovah's Witness was actually agreeing with me on this. Whilst they had their sixth, I guess, young daughter anyway, young daughter standing there next to them, presumably to, garner sympathy or some such. So, yeah, but I do find this idea that somebody contacted Jehovah's Witnesses and sent them to visit Digital Homicide is quite funny, actually. It's quite creative. And he says, this is funny to some of those individuals involved. Nobody on this end thought it was funny when attributed damage and harassment being performed. Seriously, dude, they sent Jehovah's Witnesses to you. That's probably one of the more creative things that I've heard anybody doing in the terms of harassment. Especially if you compare it to the harassment that Milo Yiannopoulos got for speaking up. All in all, it's quite funny. So what do I think about this? I think it's absolute rubbish. If they want this harassment to end, then they should do one very, very simple thing. Spend time on their games. I am not an advocate for someone giving up. If somebody wants to make games, then they should make games. And they should make them with as much quality as is possible. They should not be doing things like buying assets and just forcing them into their games. They shouldn't be doing things like stealing artwork off Google Images. They should be making the games themselves as much as is possible, and ensuring that if they do use work from other people, that it's under the correct license, and that they are actually allowed to use it, and that they attribute that work to the people that use it. Maybe even just drop them an email to say, do you mind, we are Digital Homicide, do you mind us using this stuff for our new game? So, it covers all those loopholes. So when people accuse you of stealing artwork, stealing assets, you can actually provide them with documentation to say, yeah, these people actually let us use their artwork for our game. These people let us use these sounds for our game. And here are the models that we've made, and here are the textures that we've made. That we did, not anybody else. We didn't steal them. Because that's the only way of getting people like Jim Sterling off your back, is to actually make him eat those words. And for him to actually say, this is actually a game that might be worth your time. Not because it's terrible, but because it's good. However, going back to something that I said at the beginning, do they actually want that, or do they want this to continue? Do they want to just keep pumping out cheap, terrible games, and for idiots to keep buying them because they keep creating drama? Because it's been quite quiet from the Digital Homicide front for a little while. Evidently this is what they were cooking up to be their next big reveal, to get people buying their games again. Hey, I'm cynical about this. I'm British, it kind of comes to the territory. But, yeah. Interesting, eh? Personally, I'd rather watch wheat grow. How about you? So, yeah, interesting. Yeah, I was going to... There's a bit of a cut there, because I was going to end on a, I'd rather watch wheat grow, how about you? But then I thought, well, usually I would end up with a, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you next time.